special exception? Are there any citizens who'd like to address the board on this special exception? Would the applicant like to speak at this time? Okay. Okay. Are there any citizens who'd like to address the board? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Ms. Thomas, your district, how would you like to?
I just had one question.
Sure.
I think the board is ready to vote, but I did have one procedural question for Mr. Fincham. And I'd been in touch with the applicant at various points in time, but there was an issue as far as the process. There was an issue. The building was used as a vehicle repair before, and maybe it stopped, and that zoning didn't continue because the business stopped?
Yes, sir. It lost its status as a non-conforming use. If it's discontinued for 2 or more years, then it cannot automatically revert to that previous use. There was another use that came in during that period of time, but it was not an auto repair, and therefore it lost its status as a non-conforming use.
Okay, so it was theoretically grandfathered, and then because they stopped doing auto repair and did something different, I don't even know what that was, but they did something different, then they lost their grandfathered use per se.
That's correct. After the 2-year period, it was no longer quote unquote grandfathered.
How close?
This would correct that.
How close in this 2-year period were we? 2 years, 3 months?
I don't recall specifically. I think it was a little bit longer than that, perhaps. But
okay, all right. And this is maybe something that we don't publicize enough, and I didn't know before the Chenaults called me, and we talked about it. But there probably should have been a way to do this without them going through the whole process. But that's what the process is now. So. All right, having said that, I would ask the board to approve special exception 07-2009 for Chenault Lumber Incorporated.
Second.
Okay, motion made and probably second to approve special exception 07-2009. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed same. Motion carries. Okay, now we'll move into unfinished business. First reading of text 07-2009, Mr. Fincham.
Oh, I didn't even read it.
Mr. Chairman, if the board remembers, back late summer, you considered a number of emergency ordinance amendments specifically related to the payment of water and sewer payments and cash proffers to attempt to assist the residential development community through the hard times that they were experiencing with residential construction. As a part of that process, the board referred a text amendment or 2 text amendments to the Planning Commission related to conditional zoning. One of those amendments allowed the board to accept changes to the proffers once a public hearing is started. The second amendment was a legislative proposal that came from the General Assembly that would allow the board to consider amending proffers without having to go back through the public hearing process. You referred those amendments to the commission. The commission spent several months vetting those proposed changes, and they have now forwarded their recommendation back to the Board of Supervisors for your consideration. And in effect, the commission has recommended that, 1, you accept the amendment that would allow proffers to be amended or accepted once the public hearing has started. We have had a number of issues in our rezonings where you have asked for technical clarifications to a proffer or some minor changes, and we've always looked to the county attorney as to whether those were substantive changes or not. This would allow you to accept a proffer once you have started a public hearing, okay? In order not to have to work around that whole issue. The commission, however, recommended that you not amend the zoning regulations to allow proffer amendments without going through the public hearing process. The commission had a number of concerns about procedurally how such a process would work, and felt that it was important that the public have the opportunity to address proffer amendments regardless of how large or small those amendments might be, particularly in communities such as Pendleton, Belmont, Ladysmith Village, where people have bought into the community based upon the zoning that was approved by the board with the original package. They had concerns that you know, a series of what might be considered small amendments over time might in fact substantially change the zoning. So that's the recommendation that the Planning Commission has forwarded back to the board. The board can advertise the zoning amendments with either the one change that the Planning Commission recommended or both changes as you had originally referred to the commission.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fincham. Board members have questions of Mr. Fincham on Mr. Popowitz?
You go first.
Mr. Akers?
My question is to Mike. Is there some way to have the best of both worlds, I suppose, from a standpoint? I think there have been times when the board itself has seen a need and maybe for proffers to be tweaked and changed and things of that nature once they've been approved. If we could go through the process, because I know that if a vendor or if a developer comes in and wants to change the proffers, there's a pretty hefty fee that goes along with the request for the change of proffers. And is there some way that we can put in effect, if the board, through the Planning Commission, initiates or certainly requests that proffers to be looked at to be improved or changed or something along those lines, that there would be no fee applied to those proffer changes? Now, I agree 100% that the public hearing should be there, regardless of whether it's something the board has inquired about or something, whether it's a developer that's inquired about it. The public hearing should be there. I'm just concerned about the fees now if the board inquires about a proffer amendment or suggested to the developer.
Okay. I think there's a way that we can address that, Mr. Akers.
Okay.
This is the first reading. We can, you don't have to actually refer it for public hearing tonight. So if you would like us to look at that, and it may be that we amend the fee schedule versus amending the actual conditional zoning regs themselves. But if you want to give me a couple of weeks to look at that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the board's thoughts are, but again, as far as the developer, the fee needs to be there. If he wants to come in and make a change, then he needs to pay the full price. But if it's something that the board has suggested or inquired about, I just, because we're not going to inquire and suggest any proper changes unless it's to benefit the county. And so then you have to go, they have to go back and pay this fee based on some changes or improvements or things we would like to look at.
I think there's a way that we can address that.
Okay,
if you just want to give me a couple of weeks to talk to the county attorney and look at that, then I can bring that back to you as part of this.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. I'm not sure what the board thinks. Is that something that we want to look at?
Makes good sense. It really does. All right.
That's
Other
all
questions?
I don't.
Okay, so we're not ready to advertise, but we do have at least a one point.
Right.
And you gentlemen will get together on that and get back with us next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fincham. Okay, item number 7 has been settled. We're now moving into item number 8.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we set the tax rate at 53 cents for real estate, and basically the schedule that has been outlined by the county administrator on all other.
You said 50 cent?
I'm sorry.
Say 50 cent.
I said 50, but I meant 53.
Okay. So we'll make sure we get your motion right.
Second.
Okay. Motion's made by Mr. Akers that we publicize 53 cents.
One question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
These are the same rates that we had last year?
Right.
Okay.
All the rates you talked
Yep.
about, Mr. Akers,
All the
on
rates.
that's presented in our package tonight.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Okay. And Mr. Pop will second
Yes.
that motion.
Sure.
Okay, board members ready to proceed to vote? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same. All right, that motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Akers, for that motion. All right. That takes us to the county administrator's finance report.
Mr. Chairman, finance report, Ms. Hatcher gave that earlier.
Right.
And my report is in writing and in your packet. There's a couple things I'd like to ask the board if I could. One, are there any board members planning to attend the regional elected officials dinner next Tuesday? If you are, it is at Brock's in Fredericksburg. Mr. Popowitz says yes. Anyone else at this time? If you decide to, please let Ms. Hall or myself know, please. And secondly, if I could read an email that I received from Eldon James this afternoon, and I'll be quick, Mr. Chairman. It says, Prince William County Board Chairman Corey Stewart met with the governor's policy team today about the cash proffer legislation. There appears to be an interest in the administration to amend House Bill 374 and Senate Bill 632 to allow developers to pay proffers before the final inspection if they so desire to get a project started and so forth. This is the amendment that Karen Hartwood drafted, but the HBAB rejected out of hand. The amendment would go at the end of the bill and is reprinted as follows. That this act shall not prohibit a locality from accepting a cash proffer payment prior to completion of a final inspection if the property owner or agent, applicant, developer, or entity applying for the building permit or site plan or subdivision plat desires to make such payment. The governor's staff said they need letters or emails of support to support such changes, so I'm asking each of you to get your governing bodies to agree to write such a letter or email. Does the board have a position, or did I read it too fast?
I guess I'd like to know what the pros and cons of this and what the effect that this will have.
Yeah, Mr. Fincham, have you had time to think about this?
We had to wait until the final inspection to get a proffer.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, currently in our proffer negotiations and in the final proffers that are accepted by the board, typically we have a proffer that states that the proffer is due at the time of building permit application. The General Assembly this year adopted legislation in theory, which is temporary. I think it has a 5-year sunset provision that supersedes local proffers. It says that the builder or developer can pay with the final inspection. I say in theory it's temporary because sometimes these bills are, these time limit, these sunset clauses are built into the regulations, and then subsequent General Assemblies remove the sunset provision. So the effect of the current legislation would be, notwithstanding our current proffers that have been accepted, they are superseding that and allowing the builder to not make that proffer payment until the time of the final inspection. I'm not sure that the proposed language, and I would want to talk to Eldon, I'm not quite sure how it necessarily helps us. I could see where you might have a situation where we have a final inspection and a certificate of occupancy scheduled for a Friday afternoon, and they want to close that day. Under the legislation that's proposed, it's a little more burdensome, because now we would do the final inspection and not issue the certificate of occupancy until they actually came in and paid that cash proffer. So I could see a situation, although very few, where it might be time sensitive and this amended language would benefit the builder and the prospective purchaser. So it might help us if it's time sensitive, but you could probably argue that if they wanted to do that, they would have the right to do that anyway. So I'm not sure, and Ben might know something a little bit more than I do, but I'm not sure that a builder couldn't come in and pay that cash proffer ahead of time anyway if he wanted to.
Mr. Chairman. The way I read what they are saying here, and the administration has indicated a willingness to support, we now have a proffer, or it's in that proffer, that they pay at the time of application for the
Yes.
building permit. And you're saying that General Assembly has this year approved a bill that says we basically cannot require payment until the final inspection.
Yes, sir.
Well, this says that this act shall not prohibit a locality from accepting a cash proffer, payment prior to completion of the final inspection of the property, if the property owner or agent, applicant, developer, or entity applying for the building permit or site plan on subdivision plat desires to make such payment. What I'm assuming is, under today's conditions, the way the General Assembly passed the bill, they can't pay until the final inspection is made.
I'd have to go back and look at the exact language, Mr. Akers. I think the intent of the legislation, as I recall, was that localities could not require the payment before the final inspection. I don't think it hurts to support this, to be honest with you. I'm just not convinced that it really does all that much. But
you know, I can tell you, I serve on the VACO board with a lot of Prince William people, and they generally are on top of these things, and they have felt this legislation hurts them the way it's now written, and with this change, it's going to benefit them, or they would not have suggested that change. So I think it probably would behoove us to support this legislation, or support this change that's being requested to the administration.
yeah, I have no problems with that, Mr. Akers. Anything that gives us back a little bit of that authority that we have, I think we should support. I would, just for my own edification, like to know what that really does.
Can we look at approving it and supporting it based on, because they're wanting some response in a week or two, and based on Mike's looking at it and finding that there's nothing that's going to hurt the county, and if that's the case, we'll go ahead and approve it.
Mr. Akers?
Yes.
Let me just clarify. I'm okay with supporting this. I don't think there's anything that will hurt us, okay, with the legislation that's proposed. So I have no problem supporting that. I just had a question about whether it really benefited us or not, but I've got no problem supporting it. I think that's perfectly fine.
And again, it's, yeah, okay. Okay. There's got to be something that says that it prohibits localities from accepting cash profits prior to, I don't think it would have been changed to read the way it is now written if it was not something that prohibited us from accepting it.
Okay, has anybody read the House Bill 374 and Senate Bill 632?
I have not. I have not.
What's the deadline?
I think it says in here,
Did you see it?
Within the next week.
I think it was the next week, yeah. Yeah, any letters need to be sent to their office within the next week.
All right, so we don't have another meeting in between.
No, sir, we don't.
All right, we can do it, let's put county administrator on.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we support what is being asked for here, and that we send a letter in support of this change after review by Mr. Fincham to make sure that it does not impact negatively on Caroline County, and if not, we send a letter within, and Mike, the next day, you need to look at that so we can get the letter out.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Motion made. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Motion made, pop second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Okay, Mr. Fincham, make sure you do a real good job looking that over for us. All right, sir. All right, closing board comments. Before we do have a closed meeting, but if we have closing board comments,
I have none.
No, sir.
Mr. Seeley,
No, sir.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Right. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Colonel Piner for being here, and the ROTC high school youth that showed up. I actually went to the high school and asked them to come this morning, so I really appreciated them coming. I think we did well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, and Chair has none. If someone could entertain a motion, we have a closed meeting this evening.
I move that the board convene in closed meeting pursuant to the personnel exemption of section 2.2-3711A1, the Code of Virginia, to discuss the possible elimination of certain county positions due to budgetary constraints, and number 2, the prospective business exemption of section 2.2-3711A5 of the Code of Virginia, to provide information to the board on the type of business and potential expansion of a business in the county about which no previous public announcement has been made, and number 3, the public contract exemption of section 2.2-3711A29 of the Code of Virginia, to discuss the award of a public contract for expansion of the county's wastewater treatment plant where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position of the county. That's my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion made, proper second. There we go into closed meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same. Motion carries. We're now going to close meeting. Session, and board members want to certify that we only discussed items that we went into closed session for. Mr. Popowitz.
I so certify.
Mr. Akers.
I so certify.
Mr. Seeley.
I so certify.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
I so certify.
And I certify as well. Motion.
We don't have action.
You want to make it?
Mr. Ashcraft, do we have an action item?
Second.
supposed to address finance of the school.
Let's,
Oh.
Oh. Well, George, what's
we not,
I think that should be an informal discussion at this point. So we're not going to do a motion.
okay,
We're going to ask you to discuss it informally.
okay.
motion stands.
Motion needs to be seconded.
Second.
Motion made, proper second, we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same. Meeting adjourned.